today, it's a privilege to bring on former England international Natasha Dowie to the show. Having reached incredible heights over a long career that includes winning the Women's FA Cup and English Premier League, to winning titles in Australia and Scandinavia, to representing England on the international stage, Tash understands what it takes to sustain a long and successful athletic career. She's also experienced her fair share of difficulties, from missing out on major tournament selection, facing public scrutiny for joining a rival club, and to have the need to terminate her contract mid-season. This is a wonderful chat with a player that I class as one of the most genuine professional athletes that I have ever worked with. Okay, let's go. Natasha Dowie, great to see you again.
And you. It's been a long time.
It has. It's been probably 5 years since you were a player over here at Melbourne Victory. But since then, you've gone on to represent some amazing clubs, AC Milan, Reading, and then obviously back to Liverpool FC, which is where you find yourself now as club ambassador. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I know, God, I miss Melbourne so much. Good years playing for Victory. It was like my second home. But yeah, found myself back at Liverpool. Never ever thought that would be the case, but I'm a big believer in things happen for a reason. And then hung up the boots 2 years ago. Felt good, felt like I could carry on playing, to be honest, and had options to carry on playing. But when I spoke to the club about them making me the first ever female ambassador for Liverpool Football Club, it kind of excited me more, to be honest, than playing. And I kind of felt as if maybe this was fate, that I was back at Liverpool. And now I'm able to really kind of affect things and make change. And I'm in a really powerful position, and one that I'm absolutely thriving and really enjoyed the last 2 years of retirement.
Beautiful. What sort of is the day-to-day component?
Yeah, I know. I'd love to tell you. It changes week to week, which actually makes it quite fun. It's something I struggled with at first because as an athlete, I love routine. I love structure. And that was my life for the last kind of 15, 20 years. And now there's zero structure to my life. Every week is different. I can be, in a different country within a few days. But a lot of my role entails, I do a lot of mentoring within the Boys and Girls Academy. I work for LFC TV, so I do a lot of media work, whether that's co-coms, pitch side, in the studio. I'm going to the women's training ground today to do a preview show for them. I get to travel a lot to meet partners within the club. I work every single match day at Anfield, meet and greet with fans, Q&As, photo opportunities, autographs, that kind of thing. And then get to go on pre-season tours as well with the men's team. Played in the Legends game as well the other day. So I'm living the life, to be honest.
Living the dream for sure. Yeah, you spoke about hanging the boots up, but you just mentioned the Legends game. Like first female player to play in the Liverpool Legends game. What a caveat. Like, tell us more about that.
Yeah, do you know what? It's a huge thing, and probably one that I don't really realise just how big it is. It's something that the club have been discussing for the last couple of years. The Legends game happens every year, once a year, and it's the foundation's biggest event with regards to bringing in money to support then the people in the community of Liverpool who are in deprived areas. So we raised £1.1 million. We played against Chelsea Legends team at Anfield. It was a sellout crowd, which it is every year, so 58,000. I was the first ever female, and Chelsea actually had one female player as well, Katie Chapman, play for them. So, for me, it was about, bigger picture, it's for charity. It's a Legends game, so it doesn't state that it's a men's Legends game. It's people that have played for the club, and it's quite cool because I'm obviously classed as a legend, which is pretty amazing. But then also to inspire the young girls. I had so many messages from mums saying my daughter watched the game and asked for a pair of football boots, and she wants to be a footballer like you now. I had videos sent to me as well of when I was about to come onto the pitch, mums picking up their young girls and explaining to them that, look, there's a girl playing with the boys. So, I think bigger picture, yes, women's football is huge now. It's becoming bigger and bigger. But I think to be the first and to try and inspire that next generation, I think is really powerful. And to play with Stevie G wasn't too bad either.
Go on, Liverpool legend, of course. We'll get to your Liverpool career shortly, but go on, name drop some names you played against, or
so
body
first,
like how did it go?
First 2 minutes, I put one on Makaleli late. So to be fair, he had great feet, and I just timed the tackle wrong and caught him on his ankle. So that actually got the crowd going because it was a little bit flat the first 30 minutes, a bit like a typical charity game. And then I come on and I'm just full of excitement and smash Makaleli. And then when the ref blew his whistle to resume play, I then chased down Dennis Wise as well in midfield, took the ball off of him. So I had a few good moments, to be honest, within the game. And yeah, like I said, to play with the likes of Peter Crouch, Steven Gerrard, Sami Hyypiä, some real dudek, kind of going back to that Istanbul team, kind of that won the Champions League. It was kind of celebrating that era. Yeah, Franco Zola played for Chelsea, so a very cool experience.
Oh, mate, that's incredible. Very nice. Hey, this podcast is not about reminiscing too much, although
Yeah.
there's elements of that for sure. I want to extract the golden nuggets from the reminiscing. So, whilst we enjoy those stories, we'll try and bring this back to
Yeah.
modern day education if we can. So, just obviously there's a lot in the bio, which we spoke about in the preamble and in the show notes. So, you had a really good start to your career, junior career, youth career, part of the FA Cup sort of run with Charlton, and then you moved to Everton, right? So one of the sort of first big moves of your career. What was it
Yeah.
like, that kind of decision making process around choosing a club? Now you potentially had a number of clubs to select from.
Yeah.
Just take us back to that time in your career. Like, what were some things that you thought about? Trying to share some advice to
Yeah.
young athletes maybe thinking about choosing club A, club B, or club C, or
Yeah.
nation A or nation B. Like, what went through your mind then? And looking back or talking back to your younger self, like, is there anything that you would do differently around that sort of selection process?
Yeah, I think when I signed for Everton, I was at Charlton at the time, and unfortunately, the men had got relegated from the Premier League, so the women's club kind of almost folded. So there's a period where I needed to find a new club, and I was living down in Harpenden, just north of London, and I had Arsenal reach out to me, who were like the dominant force in women's football. I'd won everything. It was 15 minutes away from where I lived. I remember Vic Akers, who was a manager at the time, showing me around the training ground. And it would have been a pretty easy option, and probably one that I would have really succeeded in. But I also had the option to go and sign for Everton. Mo Marley, who was my England under 19s manager at the time, was also the Everton manager. And it was a 4-hour journey up north. So a little bit more of a travel involved. Probably not a lot for you Aussies and people from New Zealand. That's like, just around the corner for you. But for us English people, 4 hours is a long, long way to travel. And actually, I've always been that type of player that I've never wanted it easy. And it would have been easy to sign for Arsenal because I would have just been another player in a great team. I wouldn't have really, I don't think, been that one to make the difference. And I wanted to be part of a team to kind of knock Arsenal off their pedestal and be part of like that underdog situation. And people say I was mad to do it because, I remember my dad and my mum, obviously, without my family, I definitely wouldn't have been able to have done this. But I remember 3 times a week driving up to Birmingham, which was an hour and a half, meeting my teammate, Emily Westwood. Then we would drive together up to Liverpool or Everton at Finch Farm. We would train 8 p.m. till 10 p.m. at night after the under-8 boys had finished training because women's football wasn't really respected back then. Back down to Birmingham for midnight. I'd meet my dad and then we'd get home about 1:30 in the morning. And that was 2 or 3 times a week, which was a massive commitment. But I'm a big believer in things are meant to happen for a reason. And, within my first 2 years of signing for Everton, didn't get paid anything, by the way, not even travel expenses. So this was really for the love of the game. But I remember beating Arsenal in the FA Cup final, scoring in the 118th minute, to win the FA Cup. First time Everton had ever achieved that. And I scored the winning goal. Met my partner, Becky, who's now my wife, and my soulmate. Won the League Cup with Everton. And obviously then made the move to Liverpool and now in the position I'm in. So if I'd signed for Arsenal, yes, I'm sure I would have won trophies. I'm sure I would have had a successful career still. But bigger picture, would I have met my future wife and kind of knocked Arsenal off the top, which we did. We ended up doing that at Everton and at Liverpool. We had a real kind of dominant period. So with regards to that, I always think don't always take the easy option. I think sometimes trust your gut, trust your heart, because something might seem too good to be true. Probably the move to Arsenal would have been that. But I'm also like, you kind of have a feeling, this gut feeling that what is the right move for me. And I honestly believed Everton was that. And it wasn't the easy one. But I'm always a big believer in if you're going to get to the top, you have to take the hard path. There's going to be struggles, travel, not getting paid, late nights, all these things. But I think I never ever saw it as a commitment or struggles, or it was just like I wanted to play football. So yeah, that was kind of why I made the decision to go to Everton.
Apart from those that I guess instinctive intuition sort of
Yeah.
feeling, like what other things helped you
Yeah.
make a more informed decision? Was it conversations with the coach, the
Yeah.
club? Do you have an agent? Were your parents a big part of this sort
hmm
of process? Like just yeah, pull back the curtain on that a little bit.
Yeah. So at the time, I didn't have an agent. I was still a little bit too young for that. But absolutely, I think the management, the chat with the manager helped me. And like I stated earlier, so Mo Marley was my England under-19s manager, and she was just a really good human being. And I'm not saying Vic Akers wasn't. You know, he was very polite when he took me around the training ground. But Mo had that kind of motherly feel to her. I felt as if she knew me better. I felt as if potentially her being my England under-19s manager would then help me kind of take the next step up to under 21s and potentially allow me to get my first senior cap, because Mo would be able to see me in training, obviously game days, and then I think she could have more of an impact with regards to allowing me to take the steps up through the national team as well. And I think that's important. When I look through my career, and I played in 14 clubs in 6 different countries, I was always the most successful at the club where I had the best relationship with the manager. And probably those two were Liverpool with Matt Beard and Melbourne Victory of Jeff Hopkins. And I think that's because of the relationship I had, where I wanted to run through a brick wall for that person. You know, they were my manager, but they were also my friend. They were someone that I could trust. They were someone that made me feel like the best player in the world. And when I look at maybe periods where I struggled a bit more at Reading, at clubs like that, that way maybe I wasn't as successful, Doncaster Bells, I think that's because of maybe the lack of respect or trust or communication or relationship I had with the manager. So I think that's really important, that you have that good rapport.
Mm. So back in, I guess, Everton, 19 years old when you signed, right? So
Yeah.
again, a lot of our audience from athletes' perspective will be in that kind of like late teenage years, already achieving a lot of good things, and then looking about this move. So a 19-year-old in a senior environment is a real challenge, a real realistic challenge that some of these our audience will face. So think back to the time, like, what did you learn? Were you
Yeah.
fortunately had some really good role models that were
hmm
prepared to offer support? Did you have to go and seek that out? Like, yeah, show us or tell us a little bit more on that
Yeah.
environment within that changing room that maybe these
hmm
guys and girls can learn from.
Yeah, I think firstly, the game has changed a lot today to when I played. And I actually think that potentially I benefited a lot from, we didn't have underage groups, we didn't have the kind of under 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s, 18s, 21s. Then you take the step up to senior football. When I was 14, 15 years old, I was playing with women, and I was stepping straight into that kind of environment. So I think that then prepared me for when I was then making the move to Everton at 19 years old, because I'd already had probably 3 or 4 years of senior football under my belt at a young age. I was always quite a strong athlete as well, but I think what I would always advise people is have those role models and ask questions, ask advice, but also have the respect for your senior players, because in my opinion, sometimes I struggle these days with how the younger players, I think, have a lack of respect maybe for the older players, and don't want to learn as much, and maybe think that they've made it before they already have achieved anything in the game. I remember cleaning boots for older players. When I went to Everton and was playing with the likes of Farrah Williams, England's most capped England player of men and women, Becky Easton, someone that was a senior player within the game that had been there, done it, played for England, Jodie Hanley, who was a striker with it. We had so many England international players and players that had been there and done it. And I was like a sponge. I'd ask questions. I'd want to learn. They might be a different style of player to me, but I'd want to learn or pick little points of their playing style that maybe I could add to my game, or experiences that they've had that could help me maybe earlier on in my career. I'd always want to be the first to training. I'd always want to be the one last off the pitch. I'd want to look as if I really wanted to learn. And I think that's so important. First impressions are so important. And I think nowadays talent isn't enough. If you want to really make it to the top and you're a really talented player, that isn't enough. It's about attitude. It's about wanting to do the extras, not just the turning up, doing what your coach says and then going home. That's not enough.
Mm.
So I think that if you, and especially with the coach as well, I was always pestering the coach, asking for feedback. What can I do better? probably sometimes annoying them. But to be honest, I think that's probably a coach's dream, is to have a player that really wants to better themselves, because I wasn't the most talented player. I wasn't quick. I wasn't skillful, but I could score goals. And in my opinion, I wanted to be the best, or be the best that I possibly could be. And I think if you speak to any coach that I've worked with, yes, some might say that I was hard work at times, but I think hard work in a way that I wanted to be the best, and I just wanted to win and I wanted to be successful. So, yeah, I think that would be my advice.
No, and for sure, like I speak of you in the top three players I've ever worked with.
Ah,
A
thank you.
genuine professional that has a real thirst to be better. And when you work with us at Melbourne Victory, you'd play for England.
Yeah.
You'd won
Yeah.
the Premier League, and like, what more are you trying to do other than
Yeah.
have a holiday? And that's some of the complaints that we speak about visa players that
Yeah.
come to Australia, is they're kind of here on a working holiday where you were I wouldn't say you were hard work, you were you,
Yeah.
right? And you
Yeah.
had your standards, and that perfectly fitted with me and Melbourne Victory and striving to be the best we can. And yeah, I really enjoyed our time together, Tash. And
Oh,
I
thank
speak to
you.
our younger strikers about certain things that you taught me as well as a striker, which was great. But you mentioned the word respect.
Mhm.
So I just want to like hover on that for a little bit. What if
Yep.
what if you now as a senior player, so the latter end of your career,
Yep.
if a younger player now coming through,
Hmm.
um, you say potentially there's a less
Yeah.
level of respect shown or
Yeah.
demonstrated. What does it mean now from a senior player in the environment where younger players are kind of coming through? How does it impact you as the senior player? And I'm talking about generalizations now, not so
Yeah.
much specifics. And then what are some of the things that, other than what you just spoke about, that younger talented players breaking through could become a little bit more aware of?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that when I was coming towards the end of my career and the younger players were coming through, and things have changed, more money, sponsorships, players think that they've made it in the game if they've got 300,000 followers on TikTok or Instagram. And I'm like, okay, like, what are you playing the game for? And I think I always talk to the older girls at Liverpool now about making sure that they educate the younger players coming through, because they think that turning up to Melwood training ground and training and having your breakfast and your lunch and your kit washed for you and your boots washed for you, they think that's the norm. And I'm like, the only reason they are there is because of the likes of myself, the generation before that didn't even get paid. We did the hard graft to allow them now to be in an environment where they are fully pro. Same with Melbourne Victory. We used to train at, on cricket grounds. I didn't have kit when I first turned up to Melbourne Victory, and to kind of go on that journey over the 5, 6 years where we ended up winning the league, and it still probably wasn't as professional as it is now. But I think like that's the most important thing for me. And I talk to the younger generation about knowing what came before them. They have to know their history, and I don't think enough younger generations know of the players before them. Some of the people don't even know who I am, and I'm Liverpool's all-time leading top goal scorer. Like, to me, that blows my mind. And it's not that I want them to bow down and worship me, but know who came before you, know your history about the club, know the team that you're playing for. And I think that sometimes it is a bit too easy for them these days. And I think that, agencies, there's so many different things, and there's more pressure now on the younger generation, which is tough. Media scrutiny, games are televised now, and it's going to get harder and harder and harder. So for me, I always try and advise them to kind of keep a small circle. I think it's really important that you have that small circle, the people that you trust. Try not to listen, to the kind of outer circle, whether it's your partner, your mum, your dad. Make sure the coach, whatever it is, but you keep that small circle and you just focus on yourself, because sometimes I think there's too many distractions now within the game, and actually then the kind of reason why you played the game is lost. So kind of that's my advice. And that's why I like to stay involved in the game, to be honest, as much as I can. And to try and do what I'm doing in this ambassador role is to try and keep, what I'm scared of is I don't want the women's game to become like the men's game. And actually sometimes it scares me, because I think it is. I think it is becoming more like the men's game with regards to players now not interacting with fans. Like, that was the most beautiful thing about the women's game is our interaction with the fans. We were personable. That doesn't happen in the men's game. So I just think that I don't want to lose that kind of humbleness and that pureness of what makes the women's game so special. And I think that's really important, that the coaches, players, parents make sure they keep these younger players grounded, in my opinion.
Mm. Oh, I love that. There's a book called Belonging by Owen Eastwood. Oh, sorry, Owen Eastwood, which a lot of
Mm.
our guests have sort of referenced in the recommendation of a book. That's a fantastic book around understanding, researching, knowing what's come before, not only the people but the stories, the struggles, and then kind of keeping that alive in the current moment. That's something we do now with our space in Melbourne Victory is we recognise the past and know that there's a great piece of language in New Zealand heritage called whakapapa, which is around
Okay.
ancestry. And the sun is only on you for such a small window of time, and that's going to move on, right? So the sun is on you and your team now, but it's going to
Yeah.
move forward for all of us as athletes and coaches, and then another generation going to come through. But we're part of that storyline where people that like yourself have come before us have forged a path or done something that's
Hmm.
really impactful for future generations to come. So, yeah, if you haven't come across Belonging
I
by
have to get
Owen,
that as a tattoo.
I can give you a token Kiwi tattoo.
Yeah.
Natasha, you moved from Everton to
Yes.
Liverpool. Now, out of world derbies, that's one of the top three or four that I can think of. So
Yeah.
to move from one rival to the other at a young age, right? You had won trophies at Everton.
Hmm.
Now you've gone to the blue side. Why the move? Was it more? Was it just family? Was it that's my home
Hmm.
club, or was it more than that?
Yep. So at Everton, we trained twice a week. And I remember we were definitely, except for Arsenal, the top team in the league. So to make the move to Liverpool was a gamble because at the time Liverpool were down the bottom of the table, so they weren't a very good team. But I remember Matt Beard ringing me, who I'd worked with previously at Charlton. He was our assistant coach under Keith Bonas. And he said to me, "Look, we're going to be going full time." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And he said, "We'll be training 5 nights a week. We're going to be bringing over players from abroad, Sweden, Iceland, Germany, America." And that had never happened in England before. You know, it's mainly English players playing in the English league. So that really excited me. Firstly, being able to train 5 nights a week rather than 2 nights a week. I actually then got offered money. So it was pennies, but actually the opportunity to earn a little bit whilst playing was obviously a bonus. And then the kind of thought of playing with international players from different countries, it kind of felt like just something special was happening. And I felt like it was a journey that I wanted to go on. And to be honest, it was a journey that, you know, when you look back, what we did within those first 2 years, in my opinion, you look at what Chelsea are doing now in the league, you know, having won the league 5 times back to back, that's incredible. But find me a team that had finished bottom of the league and then within, the first year of getting together, you know, all these different countries coming together and winning the league and then going on to win the league again back to back. I think that was pretty special what we achieved. And I think we achieved that because credit to Matt Beard, the people he brought in are good people. Yes, good football players, talented football players. But I think what we've always had at Liverpool and again at Melbourne Victory, I'd have to say, is good people first and foremost, rather than I remember when I used to speak to Jeff, he would always want to know about the person first rather than the football player, you know, their family, their background. And I think that is why we were so successful. And they were by far probably the best 2 years of my career, what we achieved in 2013 and 14. And yeah, no regrets then really with making the move. I had 5 amazing years at Everton, but I think it improved me as a player, being able to train full time. I was then able to make the step up into the England senior team. You know, I obviously won Golden Boot, Player of the Year, was in Team of the Year. And I really think that probably looking back at my career, those 2 years in particular were probably some of the strongest of my career. And I think that was because we were able to train full time, which is what every kid wants to be doing or adult at that time was wanting to be doing.
I'll come back to the environment in a second because that's a great
Mm-hmm.
point to finish on. But you mentioned that in the previous one around a small your small inner circle, right? A small
Yeah,
tight circle of influence as opposed to it gets bigger and therefore
yeah,
more noises, etc. Was the it might be different now. I'm assuming it
yeah,
probably is different now, but even back, 12 or whatever, how many years ago, going from one rival to the other
yeah,
would have caused some chatter, right? Some
yeah.
some media press. So how important was the tightness of your or for you as the athlete to say, here's my inner circle. That's
Yeah.
only that. That's the only people that matter. I'm not going to worry about the social media bubble or the
Hmm.
external press because of the challenges around going to a rival. So I'm just trying to think back to athletes now that have got tough decisions to make about moving from one environment to another for whatever reason they want and
Yeah.
whatever sport they play. The role that that small inner circle can play to buffer you from all the external stuff.
Yeah. So I think that I did. I got abuse online, whether it's people saying, hope you die, hope you break your legs. You're gonna get that. It wasn't too bad. And again, I've been quite good as a person and as an athlete to block that out. And I think that that is the tough thing about the social media world. Even the other day, to be honest, Gareth, when I was playing in the Legends game, I had a lot of abuse about, being the only female, and I think that really Becky's been the key to that, my partner. So yes, I have good relationships with my family, but if I'm being honest, my inner circle is pretty much Becky. She's, my best friend. I think she's 15 years older than me, and she's been there, so she gets it. And I think that's where I've been really lucky to have her as a role model, because she's lived it and breathed it and done it, and probably done more, to be honest, with regards to, playing for England, and played for England a lot more than what I did. And I think she's a different type of character to me as well, which I think is helpful. I'm a very emotional person. You know me, I'm quite eccentric, whereas Becky's very level-headed. She's calm. She's an intelligent woman. And I think actually sometimes I need her, because I'll look to kind of respond or say something like off the cuff without maybe thinking. And she just says, Tash, breathe, you know, just like less is more kind of attitude. And I think that when I have gone through tough periods, whether it is injuries, whether it is not getting picked for England, whether it is getting abused online, even going into the media world, which is what I do now, working in men's football, you get abused as well for being a female in that industry. That she's just very good for me to just talk to and to bounce off, and sometimes to have a little shoulder to cry on, if it is a bit of a tough day. But she also is very good at explaining to me, why are you doing what you're doing? The decisions to why you're doing. Why are you going to Liverpool? It's not because of the money, and half the time people don't know the reason why. And football's a fickle world. Like you look at the Trent situation at the moment at Liverpool. We don't know if he's going to go to Real Madrid or if he's going to stay. And if he stays, he'll probably get abused by some people. If he leaves, he'll get abuse. And it's a hard world to live in. No one really knows the reason why you're making that move except for yourself. And the reason why I made the move to Liverpool was to better me as a football player. And I don't really think anyone can be against that, and I gave everything as an Everton player, and the fans still respected that. But I wanted to make that next step in my career for footballing reasons. And that has always been the case, and maybe that was because we didn't earn money back then. So every time I made a move in my career, it was what would help me become a better football player. That's why I made the move to Victory. That's why I played in 6 different countries, because I knew I would be able to play in different cultures, with different playing styles, with different people. I'd have to prove myself again. So many people stay in an environment that they're comfortable in, whereas I wanted to go somewhere new because I had to prove myself again. So I think that was always kind of my mentality throughout my whole career, is I just always wanted to try and achieve new things. And I think I did that.
I personally love that. It's a mentality that I see of a winner, and
Yeah.
that comes through in other winners, right? Of every code that I've come across. Some people might determine that as quite a selfish sort of
Yeah.
perspective, which I've faced, and you nodding head, so you probably face that as well.
Yeah.
Just speak directly down the barrel to athletes who are kind of in this space now. Like, is it selfish or is it what's required? Like,
Yeah.
it's a tricky one, right? But
Yeah.
to speak openly about your experiences on that.
Yeah, to be honest, Gareth, I am selfish, and I'll be honest. With regards to that, I think that you get one career, and so for me, this is my career. And look, if my partner Becky had said to me, "Look, Tash, I really don't want to move to Australia," like obviously, then we would have had that discussion. I never did anything in my career where I just put myself fully first and thought, well, I don't really care what anyone else thinks. But to be honest, if Becky was okay with it really, that's what I wanted to then do. I didn't think about leaving my family. Yes, I missed them massively, but did that once stop me or think, right, I can't go? Absolutely not. And as a striker, to be honest, I had that mentality, whether it was good or bad. At times maybe I kind of wasn't the perfect team player because you know me, I wanted to score, I wanted to win. I didn't like getting subbed. I didn't like not being involved or feeling like I was an important part of the victory. I think that kind of real selfishness to kind of want to be the most important player on the pitch, that was me throughout my career, to be honest. And whether that's selfish, whether that's good, whether that's bad. I mean, you've said I was one of the top three that you've worked with. So, I mean, I kind of take that then as a positive. And I think you have to have that mentality to get to the top now, even more so now, because it is just harder and harder for young females to make it with how much talent there is in women's football at the moment. I think you have to have that self-belief that you are the best and that the coach needs you, the team needs you, you need to play. And as a night, you look at Mo Salah, look at his mentality. When he wants to play 90 minutes every single week. And if he gets taken off, he is not happy. If he's not involved in the game, he's not happy. And he's in his 30s now. That Ronaldo's, you look at that, you look in the women's game, a Lucy Bronze, still doing it at the top level. And she's won everything, still wants to, go to Chelsea now and help them, win the Champions League. So I think if you kind of look at those top elite players, they do have that selfish mentality. And I think it's not such a bad thing.
I think not even players, right? I think it's the elite mentality or elite performance, the mentality of elite performance, coaches, support staff, to work in high performance sport, in any sport, anywhere in the world, you have to have that, not only belief and competencies, that sort of ruthless nature of, I don't want to squash all the flowers on my journey, but I might need to break a few eggs to make an omelette type thing. And certainly coming from New Zealand, that can be frowned upon. And that's something that I really have embraced being in Australia is there's less about that. And I can assume being in England in the football sense is even less about it still. But yeah, it's certainly it's a tricky one for younger athletes in New Zealand and Australia at least to kind of feel that it's okay. And I think hearing people like yourself say, hey, it is actually okay. And me also maybe advising that it's kind of not a prerequisite.
And be proud of it as well. I go and talk to academies now and I give resilience and identity talks. So I try and help them. I go through my career and actually I focus more on the low points of my career, the tough times, to help these younger athletes get ready for their journey. And I say to them, I'll ask them questions like, who plays for their country in the room? And this is the response I'll get. It's just like a little tiny hand like this. Rather than someone putting up their hand proudly that they play for their country, it's almost like people think that it's like they're cocky or they're arrogant. And I said, it's not about that. Be proud, of your achievements. When people ask me about my career, I say, I'm so proud of what I achieved in my career. I have zero regrets, and I think that, like I said, if you're going to go to the top of your game, you have to have that aura, that presence about you, that when people see you, they think, phew, okay, this is a player. And then I think you gain a lot of respect from that. And your teammates then kind of feel that confidence and they kind of then can bring that and use that to kind of help their game as well. Yeah, I think it's really important.
I want to bring you back to environment. So in 2013 and 2014 with your Liverpool team, you won the Premier League, right? The English Premier League equivalent. What was it about that particular time, that team, that staff, the players, the club, the environment that made it so successful?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, we were like a group of sisters, and the amount of investment that we put into gelling together off the pitch. And I do think that was because of probably the amount of different nationalities. I felt like then we had to help them. So we would train together. After training, we'd go for coffee together. We would have, go to people's houses and bake together and cook together. Pretty much, any free time we had, we'd want to be together. And I think that's kind of quite unique. A lot of teams, when you go training, you just want to then go home and be in your own environment and kind of have a bit of a break away from people. So I think that then when it came to stepping onto the pitch, and I remember winning games 4-3, coming back from being, 3-0 down and winning the game last minute, that was because we were best friends off the pitch. And, if someone made a mistake, I wanted to back my sister up and support them. I think also a big thing would be the coaching staff and how they were with us. And I spoke about Matt Beard, and probably one of his biggest strengths, and again, Jeff, would be that they would invest in your family. They would invest in your life away from football. Because I remember Jeff always used to say to me when I came to Victory, how's Becky? Like, you've never really kind of asked me how I am. Like, and I'm like, Jeff, like, I'm your player. Why are you asking about my wife? And he would always say, happy wife, happy life. So if Becky's happy, you're happy. So then, that's all he cares about. And I actually found that saying so funny. And I was like, yeah, well, actually, it's kind of true. So again, investing in the person, making sure they're happy, because a lot of the time you don't know what's going on in the athlete's life, and people turn up with a brave face sometimes, and there's some tough times going on back home. And if the player isn't happy away from the pitch, they're not going to be performing their best on the pitch. So I think that's really important, that a player feels like, they're treated like a human being first and foremost. I think the club as well, the surroundings, and us as females, really feeling like we were part of Liverpool Football Club, because I've been at so many environments where you just feel like a bit part, that you wear the kit, but you're not actually part of the club. So we would go and, do appearances, or we'd go training with the men's team, go into Melwood, meet Luis Suarez, Steven Gerrard, have events like that, which were pretty cool and were the first for a lot of teams. And again, I go back to Victory, and I know we're not talking about Victory, but that is why I love playing for Victory so much, because it really was probably more than anywhere I've ever played a one club mentality with regards to, I was best friends with the chairman. I still talk to him now. He still messages me now. Ian Robson, still messages me now. So many of the staff, and I haven't spoken to them in 6-7 years, will see things that are going on social media, and they'll reach out to me, and it really was the Victory family, and they epitomised that. And that's why I love the club so much. And I remember I used to cry every time I'd leave Melbourne, because I didn't want to go, to be honest. And every time I landed in Melbourne, I felt like I was home. So I just think there's so many little things, simple things that people can do to make a player feel better. And when I go back to environments that I wasn't happy in, that was because those things of, good morning, how are you? Just even, letting on to a player. I didn't get that. If we'd lost a game, the coaching staff wouldn't play to you. If you didn't score, they wouldn't play to you. They wouldn't talk to you. And it almost felt as if you were just being used almost, and you only mattered when you were scoring goals. You only mattered when the team was winning. And if you weren't doing that, then they weren't interested. And I just don't think that that's a great environment to be in.
Well, let's bring in Melbourne Victory, because
yes,
you spent 5 or 6 seasons here. You won the Premier's Plate. We had one great season together.
Yes.
But you also then played in Italy, you played in Sweden, you played in America, you've played in Norway. You've played all around the world, obviously in England as well. What is it like playing abroad? So again, bring it back to sort of younger athletes thinking about maybe their first move abroad, or maybe they've once come back. What can you share around the challenges, some ideas, some tips around being successful about that transition to the abroad clubs? And maybe you can use any of those clubs that the countries I've spoken about, the clubs that you've played at. What made it successful? Because maybe there's also coaches listening that are trying to recruit players from abroad, thinking from a player's lens now. What are some things that helped you make that transition smooth and easy and help success, or the opposite, right? Made it difficult. You didn't feel that you could play your best.
Yeah. So when I first made my move abroad, I had an agent now. So I think that was really important with regards to, it's quite a daunting thing, moving away for the first time. I would say, firstly, this isn't always the case for people, but I was really lucky because my partner came with me. So I think, firstly, that made the move less daunting, but that's not always the case. So athletes will travel on their own. So I think, first and foremost, make sure your agent, or you have a conversation, with the manager, with the coaching staff before you make the move, so that you kind of know what you're stepping into. Because when I look back at some situations, even when I moved to Victory for the first time, I remember Dave Edmondson, who used to manage Bristol City. I remember just like getting a message from him saying, oh, do you want to come and play in Australia? And didn't even know there was a league in Australia at the time. And I was just like, yeah, why not? Let's go and play. Didn't really ask any questions. And I remember I was living in the spare room of Cat Smith's house. So, like I said, kind of no training kit. It's a great experience, but it's quite raw. Wasn't really getting paid a great amount of money. But then as the years went on with Victory, as I got an agent, as I got more experience, I'd make sure that, I was speaking to the club, I was picking my own accommodation, I was making sure that where I was living, I was happy. Because again, this is where you're going to be spending most of your time. You're there for a good, 6, 7, 8 months. You want to be happy in your home. You want to feel like you're in a safe environment where you can be at your best as a player as well. And the club Victory in particular were amazing at that. I remember Rita, who was like our assistant, kind of assistant at the time, would like kind of pick a different Airbnb, and every year we would be in amazing locations, which we'd have our own car supported by us. So it was a lot more professional. But there were environments, for instance, when I went to AC Milan, when I turned up at the apartment and it just was not what I expected at all, and I think that wasn't ideal because you can never really, well, at that time I didn't see where I was going to be moving to. So it wasn't a very nice apartment. There was no furniture. There was no bed covers. I remember having to go to IKEA and spend over £600, to get kitted out. And again, in social media world, you think, oh, Tash Dowie signs for AC Milan. You think it's like an incredible move. But actually, you don't really see what goes behind the scenes because no one's going to put on their social media, the negative things. You only put the positives. So sometimes that's a bit blinded. I would say as well with moving abroad, it was the same in Sweden and in Norway. Kind of living accommodations weren't amazing. But I would say if you're making that move, just make sure that you kind of, the package before you go, like I said. So you speak to your manager, you kind of have an idea of where you're moving to, so you know where you're moving to. With regards to as well, checking out the area. I remember whenever I was going to move somewhere, I would kind of I was into my coffee. So, okay, where's the nice coffee shops? Just so you have an idea of where you're living. And like I said, when you get there, it's a little bit less intimidating. But I think from a coach's point of view, it's so hard for a player. So check in with them. And I think if I go back to, again, Jeff singing his praises, he was so good at it because I've never in my career had a manager turn up at the airport and pick me up and take me to where I'm living. And I think, again, that says how good a person Jeff is that he probably realised someone's flying across this other side of the world away from their family to play football. Like, I need to be the first face they see. I need to be that person that gives them the hug, asks them how they are, how was the flight, how was the travel, and he did that every single year for me. And again, I think that's why I love him so much. So he would take me to my accommodation, make sure I was checked in okay, make sure there was some milk and bread in the fridge, which sometimes, again, it's little things, but you've flown across the other side of the world, you've moved to a new apartment, you're probably starving, you've got no food, you don't know where the local supermarket is. Half the time you don't have the money or currency on you at the time. And so little simple things like a loaf of bread and some milk where you can have a cup of tea and just kind of settle. He used to do that. He would then take me into the facilities at Melwood, into the stadium, introduce me to all the staff within the male and the female setup. So again, straight away, you meet faces, you're straight away into that kind of Victory family, you feel a bit more settled. So these are kind of things that I think are just so important, really, to kind of, and especially because a lot of the time, especially at Victory and in Australia, the pre-season was so short. So from you landing, kind of, you had maybe 4 or 5 weeks before the season started. So as quick as possible to get that player familiarized with their environment, to get them into kind of the rhythm that you were operating at, I think is really important as well. And just checking in, how are things, anything we can do, anything more we can be doing. Jeff was always great at that, and the club were always great at that. They couldn't do enough really for you, which I think is so important.
These are all things that they don't actually cost a lot of money, right? Yeah,
No.
Loaf of bread,
Yeah.
pot of oat milk for me
Yeah.
is expensive.
Yeah.
But it costs time, and it's time and energy. But
Yeah.
if you want to be a high performer, in this case, talking about coaches now, it's that investment of time into other areas that maybe other people won't do, that I can see through your face, right, and hear in your voice. It's going to give you a return on investment way exponentially than potentially the money that's going to bring a certain player in. I remember when I moved to the States and I had my coach and captain pick me up from the airport. Now, I'd never been to the school or North Carolina before, and to have both those two main figures, the head coach and the captain, pick me up, and the car ride back to the dormitories, and the captain's talking to me about the school, but the coach is there. That's invaluable
Yeah.
time. I remember that so clearly, and that's an opportunity gained rather than potentially lost, where that connection's formed, and
Yeah.
you can potentially play more for that player. Let's bring in the coaches more now. So talk about Matt Beard, talk about Jeff
Yeah.
Hopkins, spoke about Mo Marley.
Yeah.
So there's a number of coaches you've worked with,
Yeah.
Gareth Turnbull being one. But anyway,
Yeah.
what other than things you've sort of mentioned, what makes not necessarily a head coach, but like I
Hmm.
was the assistant coach and worked with you as the strikers.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you really liked, respected, found value from in terms of any support staff? Now, it doesn't have to be the head coach or assistant
Yeah.
coach, whatever, that you think are critical ingredients to becoming really impactful for your players.
Yeah. So I always respected, firstly, you talk about time. So a coach that actually was willing to give you their time and to do the extras. So whether it was, for instance, yourself doing extra finishing, I was a centre forward, and I've been in so many environments where I've worked with. I remember when I was at AC Milan, my coach, Maurizio Gans, was a former striker for AC Milan, for Inter Milan, for Italy. And not once did he do a finishing session with me in the year that I was at Milan. And that just blew my mind. And I would ask him time and time again. And so for me, a coach that's willing to actually put in the extra, like the extra half an hour to stay behind and work with me to help me become a better player, I think is really important. I think, to be honest, I always respected coaches where you can tell they've got knowledge of the game. And not necessarily they've been there and done it. Obviously, that sometimes does help. When I look at someone like Jeff, who's played at the top level, played in the Premier League, played for his country, you do then have a bit more, not more respect, but you think, wow, okay, he's been there and done it. So absolutely listen to what he's telling you, because, you can learn a lot from him. I love a coach that looks as if, they've put the work in with regards to preparation, detail. I think detail is so important. Every game you go into it knowing that from Monday to Sunday, you're the most prepared you can be as a player, and the coach has allowed you to step onto that pitch knowing that you can perform at your best. I think is so important. A personality, I think, is something I've always loved. It's someone with enthusiasm, passion for the game. That's what I've got. So I love a coach that has that kind of real love, and you can hear it and see it in the way that they are as a person. I think I buzz off that as a player. And if I was to ever go into coaching, that would be my personality as well, is to kind of, this is what you love. There's just so many good qualities, to be honest, and caring, someone that you can trust. And when you are going through tough times and good times, you can celebrate it with that person. And you can, and again, I do talk about Jeff, like we've had some hard conversations before. We've had full on blown rows, and I'm not proud of that. And it's not something that I enjoyed. But I remember when I left Victory, that's what he said to me. Like, we've had more highs than lows together. And even the lows that we had, where we did have arguments and disagreements, that was just because of our passion for the game and how much we loved it and how much we wanted to be the best. And we were both passionate people. But Jeff, whenever he comes over to England, he'll text me, we'll meet up for coffee. There's no hard feelings there. And I'd like to think, obviously, he thinks of me as a good person, because I absolutely do for him. So I think it is that kind of respect that you have for each other, where you can actually disagree, but it still won't affect your relationship regards to the respect you have for each other. I think actually it's quite healthy to have that kind of someone that's going to challenge you.
Mm. Is there a difference in your opinion between say Mo Marley, like a female
Yeah,
coach, and Matt Beard or Jeff Hopkins, a male
yeah,
coach? If you distill down, respect is equal,
yeah,
time is equal, coaching ability is equal. Like, I'm interested to learn this from a high performing female athlete.
yeah.
Um, is having a female coach more advantageous in all areas, some areas, no areas, it makes no difference, or equally is a male coach more
Yeah.
advantageous? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. If I'm being completely honest, I think back in the day, the only advantage I think for a female coach is they understand the female a bit more with regards to the way our bodies work, the emotions, us as people, because obviously they are a female. However, in the modern day, I think the amount of research and the amount of homework now that the men do to understand the female athlete, the menopause, all the things that we go through that men don't go through. I think now there is no difference. Men understand it. It used to be a bit of a taboo subject, didn't it? Like, if you're on your period, you just wouldn't feel comfortable going to your male coach because you'd think they would be embarrassed. That's not the case now. It's not something that, is quite a common conversation. So I think that when I look at a Mo Marley compared to a Jeff Hopkins or a Matt Beard, really, all of them had the knowledge. All of them had played at the top level. Mo played for England, played for Everton, was one of the best centre halves in the women's game, worked just as hard, if maybe actually at times probably had to work harder, because I remember, back obviously when I played at Everton, Mo was the physio, the manager, the kit woman, the drive, like she did everything. Whereas now, obviously, in the modern game, you have your staff, and you can focus more on being the manager, being the coach. Whereas that wasn't the case when Mo did it for nothing, and if anything, maybe at that time I probably didn't respect what she did enough, and again, to be able for the game to grow and for what it is now. Her and her husband Keith were phenomenal with the amount of hours they put in. And but no, I think in the modern game now, when you look at men and women, it's the best person for the job. It's not because they're a man, they're a woman, they're straight, they're gay, they're black, they're white, whatever it is. For me, it's who's best for the job. And I think you see that now within the game. And I think that's the most important thing.
No, I love that. I totally agree wholeheartedly with you on that response.
Yeah.
Before I bring in Becky and your support network, I just want to maybe take you to a challenging time that came up. England, been playing for England a number of years, number of goals. You got in there really early in high
Yeah.
school in terms of the exposure to the senior environment. But then you missed selection for a couple of major events, major tournaments. How just take us back to not so much dwelling on how the emotions felt at the time,
Yeah.
but some things that maybe you went through that or some ideas that helped you come through that. How did
Yeah.
you latch onto that to push you forward in your career? And now looking back as a 10 years, 15 years older, like, do you need to go through those hardships to become the person you are, or are there some things that you wish you knew then that might have made that pain less or accelerate you out of it further?
Yeah. So I remember when I got Golden Boot for Liverpool, one player of the year, team of the year, and yeah, I didn't make the England senior squad for the Euros. And at the time, sadly, there wasn't a lot of media attention back then, so it was kind of allowed to happen. I do say now that I think if that was the case nowadays, it wouldn't be allowed to happen, because I don't think personally top goal scorer in the Premier League or in the WSL, I don't think that player would then not get picked for their country. I think there would be uproar, to be honest. And at times, that was really tough. And people always say that to me now, like, you should have played for your country a lot more than what you did. But I always say to the younger generation, yes, it was hard. Yes, it hurt. I wish I played for England more. I wish I played in a senior tournament more, which I didn't. But control the controllables. So I can't control one person's opinion. So there will be times where you don't start on a Sunday, or you don't get on, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad player. But unfortunately, in the game, you have a coach, and that coach, makes the decisions, and you kind of have to respect that, even though it's really hard. For whatever reason, Hope Powell didn't pick me for those Euros, whether it was personal, whether it's because my playing style didn't fit, whatever it was. I kind of had to respect that and trust that she did it for the right reasons. So I always say that to players: firstly, control the controllable. Secondly, what can you do to make that situation a positive thing? Now, I then, basically not getting picked for my country, decided then to travel the world, because I knew that if I wasn't going to be playing for England as much, which I probably realised I wasn't, then what can I do to to kind of almost not get over it, but what positive can I do? Okay, well, let's start playing in Australia, playing in America, Norway, Italy, Sweden. There's not many England players that you can say have done what I've done with regards to traveling and winning leagues in different countries. So again, from a negative, I created a positive. Never once did I ever give up the hope of playing for England again, even if I thought the chance was pretty slim. I think as an athlete, if you're playing the game at the top level and you're kind of quitting mentally, I think that's to me is a worrying thing. So throughout my career, from the age of 15 to 35, I always believed that I'd make it to the top or I'd play for England, even if I wasn't getting selected. And I think that's so important. Even if you're not getting picked on a Sunday, what can you, whether it's self-reflecting, I did a lot of that, through tough times, really tough times. I used to have a kind of a journal or a diary, and I would write down how I was feeling, and day to day kind of, not mark myself out of 10, but okay, was it a 7 out of 10 kind of day? What were the tough things? What were the good things? Picking out a couple of things to highlight. I'd always set myself short-term goals. So whether it's right, okay, I haven't scored this weekend, right? What's my target going to be for the next game? Whether I'm going to have an assist or a goal or a certain thing in my game, whether it's right, I want to work on my hold-up play. I want to make sure I'm tidier in my passing, or I'm just going to work hard. Little small achievable goals, whether it's during training, the next day at training, if you're a little bit low on confidence, okay, what can I get out of training today to walk away and I can tick that off in my journal? And if you didn't achieve that, okay, you go again tomorrow. So I always just think it's important to set yourself small goals day to day, and then yes, have your kind of end goal of, I always did before a season, right? This is how many goals I want to score. I want to be top goal scorer. I want to win the league. You'd have your end goals, but also throughout the kind of season, be reflecting, watching games back. What did you do well? What could you do better? And again, then working with the coaches on that. So if there were certain chances that I'd miss in a game, I'd be pulling the coach inside and saying, right, today after training, I want to work on that finish so that come the next game, when I get that opportunity again, hopefully I score that. So yeah, I was always that type of player that through tough times. And to be honest, I remember at Reading, that was probably my toughest period in my career. And actually I spoke to someone. It's the first time, I was 33 years old, first time in my career that I actually spoke to a psychologist, because I always saw it as a bit of a weakness, or, oh, what if they tell the coach that I've been speaking to them and then I won't play on a Sunday because the coach doesn't think I'm mentally ready? Absolutely not. No, because actually sometimes you don't want to go back home and burden your loved ones. I don't want to go home to Becky and, be telling her that I'm in pain with an injury, or I'm mentally struggling a little bit, or I'm not confident, or I'm not happy, because actually they love you and then that will upset them and you don't want to see them upset. So actually, I remember speaking to a woman and it was all confidential. She didn't speak to anyone else except for me. And I would just literally tell her everything, how I was feeling, how unhappy I was. She would give me a bit of advice, tell me books to read or things to listen to. And then I'd be able to then go home and be okay, because I kind of, cried to the woman that I'd spoke to. And that helped as well at times. And maybe that's what some people need to do. So I think there's lots of different kind of coping mechanisms. But I always say to athletes, try not to let the highs be as high and try not to let the lows be as low. So enjoy the highs, but don't let them be as high as you think they are. Try to keep as level-headed as you can throughout your career, and don't let it be such a roller coaster, because I think then that makes it a little bit harder with regards to your emotions.
Yeah, brilliant advice. Next week's guest, Don Batisi, is a sports psych. So we actually delve into some of those things we're
Wow.
speaking about around script and match plans. So check in next week for that.
Yeah,
Let's bring in
absolutely.
let's bring in Becky, but also maybe your sports psych. So a big part of this conversation is and no doubt the parents
Yeah,
parentals parents
yeah.
and parentals listener would have picked up on some things as well. But if you're kind of like bringing in that part of the chapter, it's not just parents, right? It's the support network. It's
Yeah,
spouses, it's boyfriends, girlfriends, it's
yeah.
parents, sports psych. Even a coach could be part of the support network
Hmm.
as well. Like, what sort of positive experiences can you share with us from that through your journey as an athlete?
Yeah,
Maybe some of the challenges or things that you felt you weren't supported with enough
yeah.
that maybe the modern day athlete has more access to.
Yeah. So I would say that we'll start positives. So yeah, Becky, with regards to, like I said to you earlier, just someone that gets it and understands it and that I can feed off of and I can learn off of, I think is so important. As a parent, I think I've had really supportive parents where they've they've never kind of questioned my decisions with regards to they've just been there, been there to support me if they need me. Yes, dad's my coach, so he'll feedback how he thought I played in a game. But, if I wanted to move to Australia, if I wanted to move to Norway, Sweden, they just embraced it. Same with Becky, they embraced it because this was the journey that I was on, never once stopping me, and I think even through my younger years with my parents, I never once remember feeling as if there was any barriers. My parents allowed me to do whatever I wanted, to be whoever I wanted. When I obviously told them that I thought I would like women, again, no questions, and just embrace that. And I think that's so important for a person to feel like they just can be themselves. And that's the same with coaches. I think the best coaches I played under have embraced me for who I am. And I think that's hard. And maybe that's why I haven't gone into coaching and management, because to be honest, I would expect everyone to be like me. So if I was a coach, I'd expect everyone to be on time, to work hard, to be wanting to put in the extra hours, to be wanting to be the best. Whereas actually sometimes certain players have different personalities, different attitudes, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't love the game as much or they're not working as hard, but they might have a different kind of laid back persona about them. And I think I would find that quite hard as a coach or a manager to kind of handle those different personalities. And I think that's where I respect coaches a lot, is that they learn how to bring the best out of different personalities and to actually embrace people's different personalities and to bring them together, which I think is really cool. I think the negatives for me, where I found it really hard as an athlete, was when I went to Reading in particular. They signed me as a senior player. They signed me as someone that they wanted to be a leader. They signed me as someone that had been there, done it, and won a lot in their career. And the management staff at Reading were quite young. So actually, I was a bit older than some of them, even. They were in their early 30s. I think deep down they weren't bad people, but whether or not they were threatened by me or they were intimidated by me, but I felt as if for the first time in my career that I couldn't really express myself. That when I did challenge them, they didn't like it and they would almost attack back, or they would basically ban me from the kind of being able to challenge. And it got to the point where it's the first time in my career where I just fell out of love with the game, felt as if I had no passion for it. I'd go there at training, they wouldn't acknowledge me, they wouldn't talk to me. When I was scoring goals, I didn't care. When I was missing, I didn't care. I didn't want to become better. I didn't want to help them. I didn't want them to win. I didn't want the team to win. It was a horrible environment to be in, just purely because of a simple thing like what we spoke about earlier, is that lack of respect, that lack of really them treating me like a good human being and embracing my personality. And actually, instead, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but, not to be rude, they hadn't won anything in their coaching careers. So if I was a coach, I think, right, this is someone that has traveled the world. What can we learn from her? How can we feed off her to help her educate the younger generation? And vice versa. I wanted to learn. I'm sure they could help me with some things as well. But it was just a very lonely environment to be in, and one that I wouldn't wish anyone to be in. And to be honest, I was brave enough to then get out of it. I didn't end up staying for my 2-year contract. I ended up getting loaned back to Liverpool because I just thought, this is my career. I'm not wasting, the last few years of my career in an environment where I'm not respected and I'm not happy. And I think, again, that's a big thing for players, is that if you are not happy in an environment and you've done everything you possibly can to try and change, then don't stay in that environment. You can control your career. So I think be brave enough to fight for your happiness. And if you're not then happy, then you need to find a different environment that's going to benefit you more, because you don't want to waste your career. It's too short.
Yeah, that's brilliant. At the end of the day, it's your career, it's your life.
Yeah.
You just reminded me of a story that someone told me. So I forget the name of the All Black rugby player,
Mm-hmm.
but he, to play for the All Blacks, you need to conform within certain things. Short hair, no tattoos, or not quite that extreme. He went back to his Super Rugby club, the Auckland Blues, and his coach, Tana Umanga, who was an All Black great, said, look, you didn't play very well at the All Blacks. What's wrong? Blah, blah. And he goes, the feedback was he didn't feel that he was himself. He had to conform to something that he wasn't necessarily totally comfortable with. So Tana Umanga sort of said to him, look, what do you want? How can you be more yourself? And then the next week he turned up with dyed bleach blonde hair. And there was a lot of controversy about the All Black wing having bleach blonde hair. And Tana Umanga said, yeah, quirky is cool. So fully embracing him in the media. And then he went on and had the record, tries for the year for Super Rugby. A little bit like Dennis Rodman, right? So to manage
Yeah.
ego, sometimes it takes a little bit outside the box and allow them to be themselves to get the best out of them as athletes. So, yeah, some really good advice for athletes listening to try and be yourself and find your way. Coaches to allow athletes to express themselves to get the best out of them, and even the support network to encourage that if they feel or they can see that it's been suppressed in some ways, that allow them to bring it out in other ways. Hey Tash, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
I know, me too.
Come out. Let's close this off though with rapid fire questions.
Oh, okay.
Ask me any question you like, and I'll do my best to answer it.
Who were the other two top athletes that you liked working with, including myself?
Oh, I love it. There's probably a top four, but
Okay.
go a top four. So yourself, your professionalism, your determination to improve, even after reaching the highest levels of the game. I really appreciate that. Back on top, on your heels, was Lisa Devana. The season, maybe two seasons after you came in.
Nice.
Again, somebody with big personality that some people think of, as a really difficult player to work with. I thrived with that. I thought she was the main instigator for us winning the championship 2 years after you, because she just dragged us all, players and staff, on this. Just get on my back and I'm taking
Love
you.
it.
That was, she made a few enemies along the way, but she was super important for high performance. Annalie Longo, another person that's had a long career, still playing. I think she's playing almost her best football this season.
Brilliant.
Had a fantastic game against us a few weeks ago. Again, model professional, but super humble. So again, a different personality, not the biggest voice in the room, but whenever she speaks, everybody listens and takes it on board for sure. And Kayla Morrison, now she again growing into her leadership, taking over from you as captain, growing into your shoes. Leads by example, but just a proper athlete who does everything 101% proper every single day.
Love that.
And people just follow her because they want to emulate, fantastic person to work with, challenges us respectfully, but always wants the best, as do yourself, as did Lisa Devana, as does Annie Longo. So,
That's a great list. I'm happy to be involved with those four. So, yeah, sounds good.
Share with us a concept or an idea that you have either come across or use in your world that maybe we can try in ours.
You can only do your best. I think that's a kind of a saying that when I was younger, I hated, when people used to say to you, oh, did you do your best? And I'd be like, no, but I didn't score, I didn't win. But the older I've got, I think I'd realised that you can only do your best, whether that's good enough or not good enough. I think that's really good advice.
Nice one. Do you have a recommendation for a book, movie, TV series, or a podcast?
The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. It's a book and it's a self-reflection book. I'm big into that. I love Paulo Coelho. He's one of my favourite authors. So if you haven't read that, The Alchemist.
Nice one. If I gave you a magic wand and you could change anything, try and keep it within the sporting industry, what would you change?
That all young girls and boys have the opportunity to play football at school.
Nice. Is that not happening currently?
No. There's still kind of schools in England where football isn't even in the curriculum at school. And some schools, girls still can't play. So that just blows my mind. So yeah, that needs to be the case.
Yep, 100%. What's one piece of advice that you were given that you can share with us?
Believe in yourself more. I think, probably when I was younger, I didn't have that self-belief that maybe I grew to have the older I got. So yeah, with regards to earlier, that working hard, but also, believe in yourself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, then really no one else is.
Nice. Do you have a quote that you can share with us?
Yeah, I've actually got a tattoo. It says Muktub, and it's actually from the book The Alchemist, and it's Arabic and it means it is written. So your path is written for you. So I'm a big believer in trusting the process. What's meant to be will be, and your journey is already kind of written for you. So Muktub is my saying.
Nice one. And finally, what are you striving for at the moment?
Sounds really cheesy, but to be honest, just happiness and health. I think that that's the two most important things in life. I could say, yes, I want to inspire the next generation of young girls, and I want to keep being the first so that, the future generation, it won't be as hard for them. But truthfully, when you strip it back, if you're not happy and you're not healthy, and I think the older I get as well, I'm losing people in my family. I lost my granddad a year ago. Life and time becomes a lot more precious. So probably they would be the two things for me.
Hey Tash, this has been an incredible episode, lots of wisdom. You've been completely open and honest. You've had some amazing experiences. We've only really touched on the surface of some of these footballing moments, but the key for me was, well, there's many keys, but the big one that comes through is it's your career at the end of the day. Put yourself first. Use the key people around you, especially your support in a circle, to help you, to also deflect away from the noise. Put yourself first, know where I'm going, maximize those opportunities. And then obviously for coaches listening, there's lots around relationship and time and care. That's a big piece to help extract the most out of athletes. There's a lot in here that parents, coaches and athletes will take some real value from. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I also think as well, Gareth, we touch on how busy you are in your role and also being assistant of the first team and now doing this. And I think that, for me, like I want to say well done, because, you're not doing this for financial reasons. You're doing this and giving up your time. And I can't even imagine what the time is in Melbourne now, but I guess it's pretty late. And you probably got an early start tomorrow with your 20 jobs that you have. But you're doing this to help the athletes, to help the parents. And I think that credit to you, because again, you don't need to be doing this. So I think that says a lot for you as a person and as a coach as well. So well done. And I would definitely be tuning in the future.
Thanks so much for sticking through to the end of this episode. It would mean the world to us if you could hit the like or share button so we can get these amazing insights out to other like-minded coaches, athletes and parents. Cheers.